We've all heard it, probably said it ourselves, "I just need closure." We believe that if we could have one more conversation, if we could understand why things ended, if they would just acknowledge what they did, then we could move on. Then we could let go. Then we could have peace. But closure, at least the way we typically conceive of it, is a myth. Closure is not something someone else gives you. It's not a final conversation that ties everything up neatly. It's not an apology or an explanation or a mutual agreement that things are over. Those things can be helpful, sure, but they're not necessary for you to move forward. And more importantly, they're not within your control. Think about it. You're waiting for someone who hurt you to help you heal. You're depending on someone who was already undependable to provide you with what you need. You're giving your peace, your ability to move on, your future, to someone who's already shown they don't have your best interests at heart. Does this make sense? The person who ghosted you owes you nothing, legally or morally, even though it was hurtful. The friend who betrayed you might never acknowledge what they did. The parent who wounded you might never understand the impact of their actions. The ex who left might never give you a satisfying explanation. And if you're waiting for these things before you can move forward, you might be waiting forever. Real closure is something you create internally. It's a decision you make, not a gift someone gives you. You decide that this chapter is over. You decide that you're ready to move forward whether or not you have all the answers. You decide that your healing doesn't depend on their participation. This is profoundly empowering. It means you're not at anyone else's mercy. You don't have to wait for an apology that might never come. You don't have to understand exactly why things happened the way they did. You don't need their blessing or their acknowledgement or their explanation. What you need is to grieve, to process, to make meaning of the experience for yourself, and to choose to keep living fully despite the unanswered questions. That's closure, not tidy, not complete, but sufficient. The desire for closure often masks several different needs. Sometimes what we're really seeking is validation. We want them to confirm that yes, we were wronged. Yes, they messed up. Yes, our pain is legitimate. But you don't need their validation for your experience to be real. Your experience is real because you experienced it. Their acknowledgement changes nothing about what happened. Sometimes what we're seeking is revenge disguised as closure. We want to tell them exactly what they did wrong. We want them to feel bad. We want them to know how much they hurt us. This is understandable, very human, but it's not closure. It's an attempt to transfer our pain to them, which doesn't actually make us feel better in any lasting way. Sometimes what we're seeking is actually reconciliation, not closure. We don't want the relationship to end. We want it to continue, to be repaired, to go back to how it was before. But we're calling it closure because that sounds more acceptable, less desperate, less vulnerable. If this is what you want, be honest with yourself about it, but also be realistic about whether it's possible and whether it's actually in your best interest. The problem with seeking closure from the other person is that it keeps you engaged with them. It keeps you oriented toward them, waiting for them, thinking about them, planning what you'll say when you get the chance. This is the opposite of letting go. This is staying attached under the guise of seeking resolution. And even if you do get the conversation you're seeking, it often doesn't provide what you hoped it would. They might deny what happened. They might minimize it. They might blame you. They might give you reasons that don't satisfy you. They might say they don't remember things the way you do. And then what? You're back where you started, except now you've reopened the wound. I'm not saying that conversations about what happened are never helpful. In some cases, particularly where there's genuine desire on both sides to understand and repair, these conversations can be healing. But that's different from needing the conversation in order to move on. That's different from believing you can't have closure without it. The healthiest form of closure is the kind you construct yourself through reflection and meaning-making. You sit with what happened. You let yourself feel the full range of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, maybe even relief. You write about it. You talk to people you trust. You go to therapy if needed. You examine what you learn from the experience about yourself and about what you want in relationships. You extract the wisdom without needing the other person to hand it to you. You recognize your own contribution to what happened without taking on blame for their choices. You forgive yourself for not seeing warning signs, or for staying too long, or for hoping things would change. You forgive them, not for their sake, but for yours, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. And then, at some point, you wake up and realize you haven't thought about them in a while. You realize that the story of what happened has less charge, less power. You realize that you've moved on, not because you got all your questions answered, but because you decided to keep living your life regardless. This is particularly important in cases of betrayal or sudden endings. Your mind will want to make sense of it. Our brains hate uncertainty, hate unanswered questions, hate gaps in the narrative. So you'll ruminate, going over and over what happened, analyzing every detail, trying to understand. This is normal, but at a certain point it becomes a trap. At some point you have to accept that you might never fully understand. Their motivations might not make sense to you because you're not them. Their choices might seem incomprehensible because you wouldn't make those choices. And that's okay. You don't need to understand everything to move forward. There's a concept in Gestalt therapy called the unfinished business. These are past events that still carry emotional charge, that still feel incomplete. The traditional therapeutic approach isn't to go back and finish the business with the other person. It's to finish it within yourself, to say what you need to say, even if only to an empty chair, to complete the emotional cycle, even if the other person never participates. This is what I'm talking about with closure. You can have all the completion you need without the other person's involvement. You can say goodbye, you can express your anger, you can articulate your hurt, you can find forgiveness, all without ever speaking to them again. Write the letter you'll never send. Have the imaginary conversation where you say everything you need to say. Create a ritual to mark the ending. Whatever helps you feel like you've honored the experience and are ready to release it. And know this: choosing to move on without the closure you thought you needed is not settling. It's not giving up. It's not letting them off the hook. It's refusing to let what they did or didn't do continue to impact your life. It's taking your power back. It's deciding that your future matters more than your past. The art of letting go includes letting go of the belief that you need anyone's permission, acknowledgement, or participation to heal and move forward. You have everything you need within yourself. You always have. Chapter 8. Perfectionism and the need to be right. Perfect doesn't exist. This is not pessimism or defeat, it's reality. And yet so many people build their entire lives around the pursuit of an impossible standard, exhausting themselves in the process. Perfectionism isn't about having high standards. It's about having impossible standards that you use to beat yourself up. It's about believing that your worth depends on being flawless, on never making mistakes, on always knowing the answer, on having everything exactly right. Perfectionists believe that if they can just do everything correctly, they can avoid criticism, avoid failure, avoid rejection, avoid shame. But this is backwards. Perfectionism doesn't protect you from these things. It guarantees them because perfect is unattainable, which means you will always fall short of your own expectations. The cost of perfectionism is enormous. It creates paralysis because if something can't be done perfectly, it's better not to start. It creates procrastination because you need everything to be just right before you can begin. It creates anxiety because you're constantly monitoring yourself, constantly assessing whether you're measuring up. It prevents risk-taking, prevents creativity, prevents growth, because all of those things require the possibility of failure. Perfectionism also damages relationships. When you're a perfectionist about yourself, you're often a perfectionist about others too. You have rigid expectations. You're critical. You can't relax and enjoy things because you're too busy noticing what's wrong. People around you feel like they can never meet your standards, so they stop trying or they leave. And here's the thing, perfectionism isn't even really about excellence. Truly excellent people understand that mistakes are part of mastery. They know that rough drafts are necessary. They know that learning involves failing, often repeatedly. They have high standards, but they also have compassion for the process of reaching them. Perfectionism is about fear. Fear of judgment, fear of not being enough, fear of being exposed as a fraud. It's often rooted in childhood experiences where love or approval was conditional, where mistakes were met with criticism or rejection, where you learned that you had to earn your worth rather than inherently possessing it. The antidote to perfectionism is not lowering your standards. It's changing your relationship with failure and imperfection. It's understanding that mistakes don't define you. They inform you. They're data, not indictments. They're part of every single worthwhile endeavor. I want you to think about the people you most admire, the people who've accomplished things that matter to you. Not one of them is perfect. Not one of them did everything right. They all failed, probably many times. They all made mistakes. They all had moments of doubt and inadequacy. What made them admirable was not their perfection, but their persistence, their willingness to try, despite the possibility of failure. Now let's talk about the need to be right, which is perfectionism's close cousin. The need to be right is about ego. It's about protecting your self-image as smart, as knowledgeable, as someone who doesn't make errors. And this need will cut you off from learning, from connection, from growth. When you always have to be right, you can't admit mistakes. You can't say, "I don't know." You can't change your mind when presented with new information. You have to defend positions you're not even sure of anymore, just because you stated them publicly. You have to win arguments even when winning damages the relationship. The need to be right creates enormous rigidity. It prevents you from seeing other perspectives. It makes you defensive when questioned. It makes you argumentative when someone disagrees. It prioritizes your ego over truth, over connection, over collaboration. Think about the last argument you had where you insisted you were right. Were you actually right? Maybe. But even if you were, what did winning get you? Did it bring you closer to the other person or push them away? Did it resolve the issue or entrench positions? Did it make anything better or just satisfy your ego? There's a huge difference between having strong opinions that you're willing to defend with evidence and having to be right about everything. Strong opinions loosely held, as the saying goes. You can believe something strongly while remaining open to being wrong. You can present your perspective while listening genuinely to other perspectives. You can care about truth more than about being seen as right. Some of the most freeing words you can learn to say are, "I don't know, I was wrong, and I changed my mind." These phrases don't make you weak. They make you honest. They make you trustworthy. They make you someone who cares more about reality than about protecting your image. When you let go of needing to be right, conversations become easier. Disagreements don't have to become battles. You can be curious about why someone sees things differently rather than threatened by it. You can collaborate instead of compete. You can learn instead of defending. Letting go of perfectionism and the need to be right requires cultivating self-compassion. You need to develop a kind inner voice that says, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to know. It's okay to be learning. You need to treat yourself the way you treat a good friend, with understanding, with encouragement, with forgiveness. It requires shifting from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. A fixed mindset believes that abilities and intelligence are static. You're either good at something or you're not. Mistakes mean you're inadequate. A growth mindset believes that abilities develop through effort and learning. Mistakes mean you're growing. Challenges mean you're expanding. With a growth mindset, you stop needing to be perfect because imperfection is expected and valuable. You stop needing to always be right because being wrong is how you learn. You can take risks, try new things, put yourself in situations where you might fail because failure isn't a referendum on your worth. It's just feedback. This is liberation. When you no longer need to be perfect, you can start. You can create messy first drafts. You can try things you're not good at yet. You can show up authentically instead of presenting a carefully curated version of yourself. You can be real. When you no longer need to always be right, you can be curious. You can ask questions without worrying how they make you look. You can admit what you don't understand. You can change course when better information appears. You can apologize when you screw up. You can grow. The art of letting go includes releasing the impossible burden of perfection and the exhausting need to be right. It includes accepting yourself as beautifully, magnificently imperfect, as someone who's learning and growing and sometimes getting it wrong. And that's not just okay, it's exactly as it should be. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't have to be right to be valuable. You just have to be willing to show up, to try, to learn, to grow, and to be human. That's enough. It always was. Chapter 9. Comparing your life to others. Social media has made comparison easier than ever before. You can scroll through a curated highlight reel of thousands of people's lives, seeing their successes, their beautiful homes, their perfect relationships, their exciting travels, their fit bodies, their adorable children. And then you look at your own life with all its mess and mundanity and struggle, and you feel like you're failing. But you're comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. You're comparing your full reality, which includes difficulty and doubt and dirty laundry, to carefully selected moments from other people's lives. It's not an even comparison. It was never meant to be. Theodore Roosevelt said that comparison is the thief of joy, and he was right. When you're constantly measuring yourself against others, you can never win. There will always be someone richer, someone more attractive, someone more successful, someone whose life looks better than yours. Always. You could accomplish incredible things and still find someone who's accomplished more. You could be objectively blessed and still find reasons to feel inadequate. This is the trap of comparison. It doesn't matter what you achieve or what you have, because the target keeps moving. You're not measuring against a fixed standard. You're measuring against an endless parade of people who are ahead of you in some way. And that way of living guarantees dissatisfaction. Comparison also makes you blind to your own blessings. When you're too busy looking at what others have, you stop seeing what you have. When you're focused on how you fall short, you stop appreciating what you've accomplished. Your achievements become invisible because they're not as impressive as someone else's. Your relationships become inadequate because they're not as picture-perfect as the ones you see online. The irony is that the people you're comparing yourself to are probably comparing themselves to others too. That person whose life looks perfect on Instagram is likely struggling with things you know nothing about. That colleague who seems to have it all together is probably dealing with challenges you can't see. Everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. And even if their life genuinely is great, so what? Their success doesn't diminish yours. Their happiness doesn't require your misery. Their accomplishments don't erase your own. There's not a limited amount of success or happiness or worthiness in the world. Someone else having good things doesn't mean you can't also have good things. But comparison makes us think in terms of scarcity instead of abundance. It makes us competitive when we could be collaborative. It makes us envious when we could be inspired. It makes us focus on lack when we could focus on gratitude. One of the most destructive forms of comparison is comparing your current situation to where you think you should be by now. You have a timeline in your head, probably absorbed from society or family or cultural narratives. By this age, you should be married, should own a home, should have kids, should have advanced in your career, should have your life figured out. And when your actual life doesn't match this imaginary timeline, you feel like a failure. But who wrote this timeline? Who decided what should happen when? Why are you letting some arbitrary standard determine whether your life is on track? Your life is on exactly the track it's on. That's not failure, that's reality. The most successful, happy, fulfilled people often didn't follow the standard timeline. They took detours. They started over. They figured things out later than they should have. They created their own path instead of following someone else's map. Comparison also prevents you from making authentic choices. If you're too worried about how your choices look to others, about whether you're keeping up, about whether you're falling behind, then you're not making choices based on what you actually want. You're making choices based on optics, on maintaining appearances, on trying to look successful rather than on being fulfilled. Maybe you don't actually want the big house or the fancy car or the high-powered career. Maybe you want something simpler, quieter, more aligned with your values. But you can't even consider these options because you're too busy trying to match what everyone else seems to want. The antidote to comparison is focusing on your own lane. Not in a selfish way, but in a grounded way. What do you actually value? What brings you genuine fulfillment? What are your own goals, separate from what you think you should want? When you're clear on these things, other people's lives become irrelevant to your own satisfaction. This doesn't mean you can't be inspired by others. There's a difference between inspiration and comparison. Inspiration says, "They did something amazing, maybe I can too, in my own way." Comparison says, "They did something amazing, which means I'm inadequate." One energizes you. The other depletes you. Another powerful practice is gratitude. Not toxic positivity where you pretend everything is perfect, but genuine appreciation for what you have. When you regularly acknowledge the good in your life, comparison loses its power. It's hard to feel lacking when you're actively recognizing abundance. You also need to be realistic about what you're seeing when you look at other people's lives. Social media is performance. People post their wins, not their struggles. They show the party, not the cleanup. They show the vacation, not the credit card bill. They show the promotion, not the anxiety that comes with new responsibilities. You're seeing a carefully edited version of reality, and comparing your unedited life to it is unfair to yourself. Even in person, you're usually seeing people's public face, not their private reality. That couple who seems perfect might be in therapy working through serious issues. That friend who seems to have endless money might be drowning in debt. That person with the incredible career might be miserable and considering quitting. You don't know what's really going on, so stop assuming their life is better than yours. One of the most important things you can learn is that there's no right way to live a life. There's no universal standard for success or happiness. What works for one person might be completely wrong for another. What matters is whether your life works for you, whether it aligns with your values, whether you're growing and contributing and finding meaning. The only person you should be comparing yourself to is who you were yesterday. last month, last year? Are you growing? Are you learning? Are you becoming more of who you want to be? That's the only comparison that matters. Letting go of comparison requires vigilance because our culture is built on it. Advertising works by making you compare yourself to an ideal and find yourself lacking, then suggesting their product will close the gap. Social media algorithms are designed to keep you scrolling, seeing more lives that seem better than yours. Even casual conversation often involves comparing notes on accomplishments, possessions, experiences. You have to actively opt out. You have to limit exposure to comparison triggers. You have to curate what you let into your awareness. You have to practice redirecting your thoughts when you catch yourself comparing. And, most importantly, you have to remember that your worth is inherent, not earned, not contingent on being better than anyone else, not dependent on any external measure. The art of letting go includes letting go of the exhausting, pointless, joy-stealing habit of comparison. It includes accepting that your life is yours alone, unique to you, valuable exactly as it is, not needing to match anyone else's to be worthwhile. When you stop comparing, you start living. You make choices that genuinely serve you. You appreciate what you have. You celebrate others without feeling diminished. You find contentment not because you have more than everyone else, but because you're no longer measuring. That's freedom, that's peace. That's what becomes possible when you let go of comparison and embrace your own perfectly imperfect, completely unique, absolutely valuable life, exactly as it is. Chapter 10. Begin again. The practice of release. Letting go is not a destination. It's not something you achieve once and then you're done. It's a practice, something you do over and over, day after day, for the rest of your life. You will have to let go of many things, many times. You'll have to release yesterday's disappointments before you can fully show up for today. You'll have to release today's expectations before you can be present for what actually is. You'll have to release the grip of fear before you can step into new possibilities. You'll have to release old identities as you grow into new ones. This is not failure. This is life. Life is constant change, constant transition, constant becoming. And each transition requires letting go of what was to make space for what's coming. Think of letting go like breathing. You breathe in, you breathe out. You don't breathe in once and hold it forever. That would kill you. You have to let the breath go to make room for the next breath. Letting go is like that. You can't hold on to everything from your past and still have space for your present and future. You have to release again and again. This final chapter is about establishing letting go as a daily practice, about integrating these principles into your life in sustainable ways, and about giving yourself permission to begin again whenever you need to. First, understand that resistance is normal. Your psyche is wired to resist change, even positive change. The familiar feels safe, even when the familiar is painful. So when you start consciously practicing letting go, you'll encounter resistance. Thoughts like, "This is too hard, I can't do this, it's not working," will arise. That's expected. Notice them, don't fight them, and continue the practice anyway. One of the most powerful daily practices is a simple letting go ritual. Each evening, take a few minutes to reflect on the day. What are you holding on to that you need to release? Maybe it's a mistake you made. Maybe it's something someone said that hurt you. Maybe it's worry about tomorrow. Acknowledge what you're gripping, thank it for whatever it was trying to teach you or protect you from, and consciously release it. You can do this through visualization. Imagine placing whatever you're releasing into a balloon and watching it float away. Or imagine it flowing down a river, or dissolving like sugar in water. The specific image doesn't matter. What matters is the intentional act of release. Journaling is another essential tool. Writing gives form to your thoughts and feelings, getting them out of your head where they tend to loop endlessly. You can write about what you're struggling to let go of. You can write letters you'll never send to people you need to forgive or release. You can write about who you're becoming as you shed old identities. The act of writing itself is often releasing. Meditation and mindfulness practices are crucial for developing the observational capacity that letting go requires. You can't let go of thoughts and emotions you're completely identified with. You have to be able to observe them, to create space between yourself and them, to recognize that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your past. Even 5 or 10 minutes of daily meditation, simply watching your breath and noticing when your mind wanders, builds this capacity. You start to see thoughts arise and pass away. You start to see that emotions come and go like weather. You start to experience yourself as the awareness that witnesses all of this, not the constantly changing content of your consciousness. Physical practices matter too. Yoga, Tai Chi, walking in nature, any form of mindful movement helps release tension from the body. Remember, we hold on to things physically, not just mentally. That tightness in your shoulders, that knot in your stomach, that clenching in your jaw, these are physical manifestations of holding on. Moving your body, breathing deeply, stretching, all help release what's stored there. Create space for grief. Letting go often involves loss, and loss requires grieving. Our culture is not good at grief. We're told to move on quickly, to stay positive, to not dwell. But unprocessed grief doesn't disappear. It accumulates. It weighs on you. It blocks you. Give yourself permission to feel sad about what you're releasing, even when you know releasing it is the right thing. You can grieve a relationship that needed to end. You can grieve a dream that's no longer viable. You can grieve who you used to be, even as you become who you're meant to be. Grief doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're human. Build a support system. Letting go is hard to do alone. Find people who understand what you're trying to do, who can remind you why you're doing it when you forget, who can hold space for your process without trying to fix you or rush you. This might be friends, family, a therapist, a support group, or a spiritual community. Whoever it is, having witnesses to your journey makes it more sustainable. Practice self-compassion ruthlessly. You will backslide. You will pick back up things you thought you'd let go of. You will struggle. You will have days where it feels impossible. This doesn't mean you're failing. This means you're human. Speak to yourself with kindness. Treat yourself like someone you love who's going through a difficult time. Be your own ally, not your own critic. One powerful practice is to regularly examine your attachments. What am I gripping right now? What am I afraid to lose? What am I trying to control? What story am I telling myself that keeps me stuck? Just naming these things, bringing them to conscious awareness, begins the process of loosening their hold. Also, practice celebrating small releases. Notice when you let something go, even something small, and acknowledge it. You didn't rise to that bait in an argument. You didn't check your ex's social media. You didn't ruminate about that mistake all day. You chose differently than you usually do. That's worth recognizing. Small shifts accumulate into big transformations. Understand that different areas of life will require different approaches. Letting go of a relationship looks different than letting go of a career that's no longer serving you, which looks different than letting go of a belief about yourself. Don't expect one strategy to work for everything. Be flexible. Be willing to try different approaches. There will be layers to your letting go. You might think you've released something and then it comes up again and you realize there's another layer to work through. This is normal. Healing and growth happen in spirals, not straight lines. You're not back where you started just because a familiar issue reappears. You're encountering it from a different level of awareness. Create rituals for significant releases. When you're letting go of something major, mark it. Write a letter and burn it. Collect objects that represent what you're releasing and bury them or throw them into water. Have a ceremony with trusted friends. Ritual helps your psyche understand that something is ending and something new is beginning. Stay connected to your why. Why are you doing this work? Why does letting go matter to you? What kind of life are you trying to create? When the practice gets difficult, and it will, coming back to your deeper motivation helps you persist. For me and for many people I've worked with, the why is freedom. Freedom to be fully present. Freedom to respond to life rather than react from old wounds. Freedom to make choices based on who you are now, not who you were conditioned to be. Freedom to love without suffocating attachment. Freedom to pursue dreams without being paralyzed by fear of failure. Freedom to be yourself fully and unapologetically. What's your why? Get clear on it. Write it down. Return to it often. Also recognize that letting go creates space, and space can feel uncomfortable at first. You've been filling your life with noise, with busyness, with relationships and activities that maybe didn't serve you, but at least they were familiar. When you let those things go, there's a void, an emptiness, and your first instinct might be to fill it immediately with something else. Resist that urge. Sit with the space. Let it be empty for a while. This is where transformation happens. This is where you discover what you actually want, separate from what you've been conditioned to want. This is where your authentic self has room to emerge. The space might feel scary, you might feel lonely, unmoored, uncertain. That's okay. That's part of the process. You're restructuring your entire life. That takes time. Be patient with yourself, and know this: as you let go, as you create space, as you become more yourself, the right things will come. Not necessarily what you expected, not necessarily what you thought you wanted, but what actually serves your growth and fulfillment. The universe, life, whatever you want to call it, has a way of filling intentionally created space with exactly what's needed. Finally, give yourself permission to begin again, and again, and again. Every moment is a new opportunity to practice letting go. You don't have to wait until you've messed up or held on too long. You can start fresh right now. Each morning is a beginning. Each breath is a beginning. Any moment where you notice you're gripping and you choose to open your hand is a beginning. You're not starting over. You're spiraling upward, encountering similar lessons from higher and higher levels of awareness. Each time you practice letting go, you get better at it. Not perfect, just better. More skilled, more efficient, more graceful. The art of letting go is, ultimately, the art of living fully, because life is change. Life is impermanence. Life is constantly beginning and ending and beginning again. The more you can flow with that, the more you can release what was and embrace what is, the more alive you become. This book is ending, but your practice is just beginning, or continuing, or deepening, depending on where you are in your journey. Take what's useful from these pages and leave the rest. Make this practice your own. Adapt it to your life, your circumstances, your unique path. And remember, you are not broken and in need of fixing. You are a human being learning to be human. Letting go is part of that learning. It's part of that becoming. It's part of claiming your birthright, which is a life lived with open hands and an open heart. You're going to be okay, more than okay. You're going to be free, and that freedom begins the moment you decide to let go. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. May you find peace in the practice of release. May you discover lightness where there was heaviness. May you experience the profound joy of letting go and living fully right here, right now, in this precious, fleeting, beautiful moment. Begin again, as many times as you need to. You got this. Chapter 1. The weight we carry. We live our lives accumulating. Not just possessions, though those pile up too, but something far heavier. We accumulate expectations that were never ours to begin with. We carry resentments from years past, some so old we've forgotten their origin, but still feel their sting. We hold on to versions of ourselves that no longer fit, like clothing from a decade ago, that we insist we'll wear again someday. We grip tightly to relationships that have run their course, to careers that drain us, to beliefs that limit us, all because letting go feels like losing something essential. But what if I told you that what you're losing is the very thing holding you back? The art of letting go is not about giving up or surrendering to defeat. It's not about becoming passive or indifferent to life. Rather, it's about making space. Space for growth, for new experiences, for the person you're becoming rather than the person you used to be. It's about recognizing that your hands are already full, and until you set something down, you cannot pick up anything new. Think about water for a moment. Water doesn't cling. It flows around obstacles, it adapts to whatever container holds it, and it always finds its way forward. It either finds another path or it rises slowly until it can overflow. Water teaches us that resistance creates suffering, while acceptance creates movement. Yet here we are, gripping so tightly to things that no longer serve us, that our knuckles turn white and our arms grow tired. We've convinced ourselves that holding on is strength, when sometimes the greatest strength is in the release. I've spent years studying human behavior, working with people from all walks of life, and I've noticed a pattern. The most stuck individuals aren't those who lack opportunity or talent. They're the ones who cannot let go. They cannot let go of the past. They cannot let go of what others think. They cannot let go of who they thought they would be by now. They're so busy clutching yesterday that they have no hands free for today. This book is about changing that. It's about learning to open your hands, to release what's weighing you down, and to discover that letting go doesn't make you lighter by subtraction. It makes you lighter by liberation. Throughout these pages, we'll explore the many forms that holding on takes. We'll examine why we cling to pain, to toxic relationships, to limiting beliefs, and to identities that no longer fit. More importantly, we'll learn practical methods for releasing these burdens, one by one, until you can move through life with the ease and grace you were always meant to have. Letting go is not a single event. It's not something you do once and check off your list. It's a practice, an art form that you'll refine throughout your entire life. Some days you'll excel at it. Other days you'll find yourself white-knuckling again, and that's okay. The art of letting go includes letting go of the expectation that you'll be perfect at it. This journey we're beginning together will challenge you. It will ask you to examine corners of your heart and mind that you may have been avoiding. It will require honesty, courage, and compassion for yourself. But I promise you this, on the other side of letting go is a freedom you may have forgotten was possible, so take a breath. Settle in. And let's begin the most important release of your life. Chapter 2. Understanding attachment. Attachment is fundamentally human. From the moment we're born, we attach. A newborn attaches to their mother for survival, for food, for comfort, for safety. This attachment is biological, hardwired into our neural pathways. It's what keeps us alive in those vulnerable early months and years. So attachment begins as something essential, something life-sustaining. But somewhere along the way, this survival mechanism becomes something else. It becomes a pattern we apply to everything. We attach to outcomes, to plans, to how we think things should be. We attach to material possessions, assigning them meaning they don't inherently possess. We attach to people in ways that go beyond healthy connection, making their presence essential to our sense of self. We attach to ideas about who we are, creating rigid identities that we defend at all costs. The Buddhist tradition has been exploring attachment for thousands of years, and their insights remain remarkably relevant. They teach that attachment is the root of suffering, not because caring is wrong, but because attachment involves grasping. When we grasp, we create tension. We create the conditions for disappointment, because life, by its very nature, is impermanent. Everything changes, every single thing. Your body changes from moment to moment. Cells die and regenerate. Your thoughts shift and evolve. Relationships transform. Circumstances alter. The person you love will not be exactly the same tomorrow as they are today. Neither will you. This is not pessimism. This is simply truth. We're fighting against the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that fight is exhausting. Let me be clear about something crucial here. Attachment is not the same as love. You can love deeply without attaching. In fact, the deepest love exists without attachment, because real love wants the best for the other person, even when that means letting them go. Attachment is the closed fist, gripping the bird so tightly that it cannot breathe, cannot spread its wings, cannot be what it was meant to be. Love is the open palm, the willingness to let the bird fly, trusting that if it's meant to return, it will. And if it doesn't, you still had the privilege of knowing it. Attachment also shows up in subtle ways we rarely acknowledge. We attach to being right. We attach to our wounds because they've become part of our identity and we wouldn't know who we are without them. We attach to our stories about the past, polishing them until they shine, regardless of whether they're entirely accurate. We attach to potential futures that exist only in our imagination, then feel devastated when reality takes a different path. The psychological research on attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, shows us that our early attachment patterns with caregivers often predict how we attach later in life. Those who experienced anxious or avoidant attachment patterns often recreate those same dynamics throughout their lives. But here's the hopeful part. Patterns can be changed. Neural pathways can be rewired. You are not doomed to repeat the attachment styles of your childhood. Awareness is the first step, and you're building that awareness right now. One of the most important distinctions to understand is the difference between healthy connection and unhealthy attachment. Healthy connection is flexible. It allows for independence, for growth, for change. It's rooted in the present moment and appreciates what is without demanding it remain frozen in time. Unhealthy attachment is rigid. It requires things to stay the same, and it creates anxiety when they inevitably don't. Healthy connection says, I enjoy spending time with you. One creates space for life to unfold naturally. The other tries to control life into a specific shape. We also need to talk about the attachment to outcomes. You set a goal, which is good. You work toward it, which is admirable. But then you become so attached to achieving it in a specific way by a specific time that you create enormous suffering for yourself. You miss the learning in the journey because you're fixated on the destination. You can't pivot when circumstances change because you're locked into one particular vision. The antidote is not to stop caring about outcomes entirely, it's to hold your goals and desires lightly, to work toward them with full effort while remaining unattached to exactly how and when they manifest. Understanding attachment also means recognizing its emotional signature in your body. Attachment often feels like tightness, like gripping, like fear of loss. When you're attached, you feel that clench in your chest when things don't go as planned. You feel that desperation to control, to manage, to ensure a specific outcome. Learning to notice these sensations is crucial, because they're your early warning system that attachment has taken hold. Throughout this book, we'll return again and again to this concept of attachment versus connection, because it's the foundation of everything else. For now, simply begin to notice. Where in your life are you grasping? Where are you trying to make permanent what is temporary? Where are you confusing attachment with love? This awareness alone, without judgment, without trying to change anything yet, is powerful. Because you cannot let go of what you haven't first acknowledged you're holding. Chapter 3. The Stories We Tell Ourselves. Every human being is a storyteller. We don't just experience life, we narrate it. We create meaning from events. We build narratives that explain why things happened, and we cast ourselves as characters in an ongoing drama. This isn't a flaw. It's how our minds make sense of the chaos and complexity of existence. But here's the problem. Many of the stories we tell ourselves are fiction masquerading as fact. You tell yourself a story about why your partner said something in a certain tone. You tell yourself a story about what your boss meant by that email. You tell yourself a story about why you didn't get the promotion, why your friend didn't call back, why your life turned out this way instead of that way. And once you've told yourself these stories enough times, you forget their interpretations. You start believing their objective truth. These narratives become the lens through which you see everything. If your story is, "People always leave me," then you'll interpret every interaction through that lens. You'll find evidence for it everywhere, because our brains are wired to confirm what we already believe. Someone cancels plans, and instead of thinking, "They're probably busy," you think, "See, they're leaving me too." You've taken your memories, which are already unreliable and constantly changing, and you've woven them into a coherent narrative. You decided what things meant. You've assigned motivations to others. You've interpreted events through the lens of who you are now, not who you were then. Maybe your story is that your parents didn't support you. Maybe that's true. Or maybe they supported you in the only way they knew how, limited by their own wounds and circumstances. Maybe your story is that you wasted your 20s. Or maybe you learned exactly what you needed to learn during that time. Maybe your story is that you're broken because of what happened to you. Or maybe you're resilient, still standing despite everything. I'm not suggesting that painful things didn't happen. I'm not diminishing real trauma or real loss. What I'm saying is that the story you've built around those events, the meaning you've assigned to them, is not the only possible story. And if the story you're telling yourself is keeping you stuck, is causing you suffering, then it might be time to examine whether it's serving you. One of the most common stories people tell themselves is the story of unworthiness. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. I'm not attractive enough, I'm not talented enough. Where did this story come from? Often it came from someone else's words, someone else's judgment, someone else's limitation that you internalized and made your own. A teacher who told you that you weren't smart. A parent who compared you to a sibling, a partner who made you feel small. And you took those words, those moments, and you built an entire identity around them. You collected evidence. Every rejection became proof of your unworthiness. Every failure confirmed the story. And now Years later, you're still living inside a narrative that someone else started. The dangerous thing about stories is that they're self-fulfilling. If you believe you're unlikable, you'll act in ways that push people away, then use their distance as proof that you were right all along. If you believe you always fail, you'll sabotage yourself, ensuring the outcome you fear. If you believe you don't deserve good things, you'll unconsciously reject them when they appear. So how do we break free from these narratives? The first step is recognizing that you're in a story to begin with. Start paying attention to the language you use when you talk about yourself and your life. Notice the words always and never. Notice the dramatic conclusions you draw from single events. Notice when you're stating opinion as fact. The second step is getting curious about your stories. Instead of accepting them as truth, question them. Ask yourself, is this definitely true? What evidence contradicts this story? What's another way to interpret what happened? If a friend told me this story about themselves, what would I say to them? The third step is recognizing that you are not your story. You are the awareness beneath the story. You are the one who can observe the narrative, which means you're separate from it. You can have a thought without being that thought. You can tell a story without being trapped in it. I worked with someone once who had a powerful story about being abandoned. Her father left when she was young, her first serious relationship ended badly, and she'd built an entire worldview around the belief that people always leave. She was in her 40s, and this story had shaped every relationship since childhood. When we examined this narrative closely, something interesting emerged. Yes, her father left. That was true, but her mother stayed. Her grandparents stayed. Her best friend from high school was still in her life. Her younger brother was devoted to her. Multiple people had tried to get close to her over the years, but she'd kept them at arm's length, protecting herself from the abandonment she believed was inevitable. The story "people always leave me" wasn't reflecting reality, it was creating reality. Once she could see this, once she could recognize that she was living inside a narrative rather than responding to the truth of the present moment, everything shifted. She didn't have to trust everyone immediately. She didn't have to pretend the past didn't hurt, but she could start writing a new story, one that included both the pain of what happened and the possibility of something different. This is the work of letting go, releasing our attachment to the stories that no longer serve us, even when those stories feel like they define us. Your story about who you are is not who you are. It's just a collection of thoughts, memories, and interpretations that you've arranged in a certain order. And just like you can rearrange furniture in a room, you can rearrange the narrative of your life. You can emphasize different chapters. You can reinterpret events. You can decide that something that happened to you doesn't have to define you forever. This doesn't mean denying what happened. It means refusing to let what happened be the only thing that matters. It means understanding that you are not your past. You are what you do with it. The stories we tell ourselves about the future are equally limiting. I'll never find love. I'll never succeed. I'll never get over this. These narratives about what hasn't happened yet box us into predetermined outcomes. They close off possibilities before we even begin. What if, instead of these rigid narratives, we could hold our future lightly? What if we could say, I don't know what will happen, and I'm open to being surprised? What if we could release our attachment to the story having to unfold in a particular way? This is liberation. Not from having stories, because we'll always have them, but from being imprisoned by them. From mistaking them for truth, from letting them dictate our present moment. Your life is still being written. You are both the author and the main character, and while you can't control everything that happens, you can absolutely control the meaning you make from it. You can control whether you interpret challenges as confirmation that you're cursed or as opportunities to grow. You can control whether you see yourself as a victim of circumstance or as someone who responds to circumstance with agency and grace. The art of letting go includes letting go of the stories that keep you small, that keep you stuck, that keep you suffering. And in the space that opens up when you release those narratives, you'll find something extraordinary, the truth of who you actually are, beneath all the stories you've been telling. Chapter 4: The Prison of the Past. Yet most people spend enormous amounts of their present moment energy living in a time that no longer exists. They're replaying conversations from years ago, reimagining how things could have gone differently, nursing wounds that have long since scarred over, refusing to forgive, refusing to move forward, refusing to let what was. The past becomes a prison in countless ways. Sometimes it's regret that locks the cell door. You made a choice, and it didn't turn out the way you hoped. Maybe you hurt someone. Maybe you missed an opportunity. Maybe you took a path that led somewhere you never wanted to be. And now, months or years or decades later, you're still punishing yourself for it. You're still playing the what-if game, torturing yourself with alternate versions of reality that can never be. Here's the truth about regret. It's useful for about 5 minutes, long enough to learn the lesson, to understand what you'd do differently, to integrate the wisdom. After that, it's just suffering. It's choosing to live in a past you cannot change while sacrificing a present you could be fully experiencing. Sometimes the prison of the past is built from trauma. Something happened that shouldn't have happened. Something was done to you that left wounds, that changed you, that still echoes through your life today. This is real, this is valid, and this deserves compassion and often professional support to heal. But even trauma, as powerful as it is, doesn't have to define your entire existence. You are not what happened to you. You are how you choose to carry it, how you choose to heal from it, and whether you choose to let it be the entire story or just one chapter. Your body remembers what your mind sometimes wants to forget. A certain smell, a particular tone of voice, a specific situation can trigger you right back into that moment, even though you're completely safe now. This is why healing from the past often requires working with the body, not just the mind. Talk therapy helps, but sometimes we need somatic work. We need to teach our nervous systems that the threat is over, that we can return to the present. Other times, the past holds us captive through nostalgia. We romanticize how things used to be. We remember a relationship as perfect, conveniently forgetting all the reasons it ended. We remember a job as fulfilling, glossing over the stress and dissatisfaction we actually felt. We remember our younger selves as happier, healthier, better, when the truth is we were probably struggling then too, just with different things. Nostalgia is a liar. It presents us with a carefully edited version of history, all the good parts highlighted and the difficult parts conveniently faded. We think, I should have appreciated what I had, while failing to appreciate what we have now, thereby ensuring we'll feel the same regret about this moment somewhere down the line. The prison of the past also manifests in the grudges we hold. Someone wronged you, they hurt you, betrayed you, disappointed you, and you're still angry about it. You've been carrying this anger for so long it feels like part of you. You've rehearsed what you'd say to them if you had the chance. You've imagined them apologizing. You've imagined them suffering. You've invested hours and hours of mental energy into something that's already over. But who is that anger really hurting? Not them. They've probably moved on with their life. They might not even remember the incident that you replay constantly. The anger is poisoning you, not them. It's keeping you chained to a moment in time, unable to step forward because you're too busy looking backward. Forgiveness is not about them. Let me repeat that because it's crucial. Forgiveness is not about saying what they did was okay. It's not about reconciliation or letting them back into your life. Forgiveness is about releasing yourself from the prison of resentment. It's about deciding that your peace matters more than your anger. It's about refusing to let someone who hurt you continue to have power over your present moment. I've seen people waste decades on grudges. Entire families torn apart because someone said something hurtful at a holiday gathering 15 years ago and nobody was willing to be the first to let it go. People carrying bitterness like a badge of honor, as if holding on to pain makes them strong. It doesn't make you strong. It makes you stuck. There's also the trap of the glory days mentality. The athlete who peaked in high school and has spent the subsequent 30 years reliving those few years of success. The person who did something noteworthy once and has been dining out on that story ever since. The individual who cannot stop talking about how things used to be, how much better life was before, how everything has gone downhill since. It means you've decided that your best is behind you, which is perhaps the saddest decision a person can make while they're still breathing. The past also imprisons us through unprocessed grief. You lost someone, something ended, a chapter closed, and you never fully grieved it. You pushed the pain down, stayed busy, told yourself you were fine. But grief doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It waits. It accumulates, and eventually it demands to be felt. Letting go of the past requires letting yourself feel what you haven't felt. It requires crying the tears you've been holding back, screaming the anger you've been suppressing, acknowledging the disappointment you've been denying. This isn't wallowing, this is processing. This is completing the emotional cycle so it doesn't keep looping endlessly. One powerful practice for releasing the past is writing. Write letters you'll never send to people who hurt you. Write about regrets, not to reinforce them, but to drain them of their power. Write about memories that haunt you, examining them in the light of day, rather than letting them lurk in the shadows of your mind. Getting the past out of your head and onto paper is remarkably liberating. Another practice is ritual. Create a ceremony for letting go. Write what you're releasing on paper and burn it. Collect objects that represent the past and bury them or throw them into a body of water. Physical acts can help your psyche understand that you're serious about release. The past will always be part of your story, but it doesn't have to be the cage you live in. You can remember without being imprisoned by memory. You can acknowledge what happened without being defined by it. You can carry wisdom from experience without carrying the weight of regret, resentment, or nostalgia. Every moment you spend in the past is a moment you're not present for your actual life. Your life is happening now, not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, now. And now keeps moving forward whether you're paying attention or not. The prison of the past has no lock on the outside. You're the guard and the prisoner both, and the door has been open this whole time. All you have to do is walk through it. We crave it. We build our entire lives around the pursuit of it. We make plans, we create systems, we try to manage every variable, all in service of the comforting illusion that we can determine exactly how things will unfold. And then life happens, as it always does, in completely unexpected ways, and we fall apart. The truth is that control is largely an illusion. You control less than you think you do. Much less. You don't control whether it rains on your wedding day. You don't control whether you get sick. You don't control the economy, traffic, other people's choices, or whether the person you love will love you back. You don't control aging. You don't control whether your business succeeds despite your best efforts or fails despite them. You don't control most of what happens in any given day. What you do control is remarkably small and remarkably important. Your actions, your responses, your attitude, your effort. That's essentially it. And somehow we've convinced ourselves that if we just try hard enough, if we just plan well enough, if we just worry enough, we can expand that circle of control to include things that were never ours to control in the first place. This is exhausting. More than that, it's a recipe for constant disappointment and anxiety. The need for control often stems from fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of the unknown, fear of vulnerability, fear of being hurt. If we can control everything, we reason, then we can keep ourselves safe. We can prevent bad things from happening. We can ensure the outcomes we want. But this is backwards. The more we try to control, the more anxious we become, because we're constantly confronting the reality that our control is limited. We're constantly managing, monitoring, micromanaging, and it's never enough because it can never be enough. There will always be variables we didn't account for, circumstances we couldn't foresee, factors beyond our influence. Think about relationships. How much suffering comes from trying to control another person? You want them to change, to be different, to meet your needs in specific ways. You manipulate. You cajole. You withdraw love as punishment. You offer it as reward. You exhaust yourself trying to shape them into your ideal version of who they should be. And they resist, as anyone would, because nobody wants to be controlled. The paradox is that when we release our need to control others, when we accept them as they are, the relationship often improves. Not because they change, but because the dynamic changes, the tension releases. Both people can breathe. Or think about career. You make a detailed 10-year plan. You know exactly where you'll be and when you'll get there. Then the economy shifts, your industry changes, you discover a new passion, you get sick, a pandemic hits, any number of things happen that weren't in the plan. If you're rigidly attached to your vision of how things should unfold, you'll suffer. You'll experience every deviation as a failure, every unexpected turn as a disaster. But if you can hold your goals loosely, if you can remain flexible, if you can recognize that the path to your dreams might look nothing like what you imagined, then you can adapt. You can pivot. You can find new routes when old ones close off. The Stoic philosophers understood this deeply. They made a clear distinction between what's up to us and what isn't. What's up to us, according to Epictetus, is our opinions, motivations, desires, and aversions, essentially our inner life, our choices, our responses. What's not up to us is pretty much everything else: our body, our reputation, our relationships, our circumstances, other people's choices and opinions. The Stoics taught that freedom comes from focusing entirely on what's within our control and accepting everything else with equanimity. Not passively accepting in the sense of not taking action, but accepting the reality of what is while we work to influence what we can. This is radically different from how most people operate. Most people pour their energy into trying to control what they cannot control while neglecting what they can control. They worry about what others think instead of focusing on their own character. They stress about outcomes instead of focusing on effort. They try to change their partner instead of examining their own behavior. Letting go of control doesn't mean becoming passive or fatalistic. It doesn't mean you stop planning or stop working toward goals. It means you do what's in your power to do, you put in maximum effort, and then you release your attachment to the specific outcome. You trust the process. You trust that you'll be able to handle whatever happens, even if it's not what you wanted. This is terrifying for many people, but if I don't try to control everything, chaos will reign. Not true. What happens is that you stop wasting energy on futile efforts to control the uncontrollable, and you start investing that energy where it can actually make a difference. You cannot control who your child becomes. You can influence them, guide them, teach them, love them, but ultimately they are their own person with their own path. Parents who try to control every aspect of their child's life create rebellion or dependence, neither of which serves the child. Parents who provide structure and support while allowing autonomy raise children who can think for themselves and make their own way in the world. The need for control also manifests in perfectionism. If everything has to be exactly right, if there's no room for error, if you're constantly anxious about making mistakes, you're trying to control outcomes that cannot be completely controlled. Perfect doesn't exist. It's a moving target, an impossible standard, and chasing it means you'll never feel satisfied. Letting go of perfectionism doesn't mean lowering your standards or not caring about quality. It means accepting that done is better than perfect, that mistakes are part of learning, that imperfection is part of being human. It means releasing the illusion that if you just try hard enough, you can eliminate all flaws and uncertainties. One of the most liberating practices is learning to differentiate between influence and control. You can influence many things without controlling them. You can influence your health through diet and exercise, but you can't control whether you get sick. You can influence the quality of your work, but you can't control whether you get promoted. You can influence how you show up in a relationship, but you can't control whether it works out. Influence is empowering. It means you matter, your choices matter, your effort matters. But influence without attachment to outcome is where peace lives. You do your best and then surrender the rest. Surrendering control is a daily practice. Every day will present you with things you cannot control. Traffic, weather, other people's moods, technical difficulties, unexpected challenges. Every day is an opportunity to notice when you're trying to control the uncontrollable, to pause, to breathe, and to redirect your energy toward what you can actually influence. Ask yourself throughout the day, is this within my control? If yes, take appropriate action. If no, let it go. It's that simple, though simple doesn't mean easy. The ultimate thing we cannot control is death, both our own and the deaths of those we love. This is the greatest uncertainty, the greatest vulnerability, the thing that proves beyond doubt that our control is limited. And yet, accepting this, truly accepting the impermanence of all things, is what allows us to be fully present for the time we have. When we stop trying to control everything, we stop living in constant tension. We stop bracing against life. We start flowing with it instead of fighting it. And, paradoxically, when we release our grip, when we open our hands, we often find that life flows more smoothly. Opportunities appear that we couldn't have planned for, and things work out in ways we never could have orchestrated. The art of letting go includes letting go of the exhausting, impossible task of trying to control reality. It includes accepting uncertainty, embracing imperfection, and trusting yourself to handle whatever comes. Not because you can control what comes, but because you don't need to. Some relationships are toxic. Some people are not capable of healthy connection, at least not right now, not with you. And staying in a relationship that damages you is not noble. It's self-betrayal. A toxic relationship is one that consistently diminishes you rather than enhances you. It's one where you feel worse about yourself after interactions rather than better. It's one where your boundaries are repeatedly violated, your needs are consistently dismissed, your reality is denied, your growth is stunted. Toxic relationships come in many forms. There's the overtly abusive relationship where there's violence, cruelty, or deliberate harm. But there are also subtler forms. The relationship where you're constantly walking on eggshells, never sure what will set the other person off. The friendship where everything is always about them, and your needs never matter. The family dynamic where criticism is constant and approval is withheld. The partnership where you've become small to accommodate someone else's dysfunction. The challenge is that toxic relationships often have moments of goodness mixed in. The person isn't terrible all the time. Sometimes they're loving, sometimes they're apologetic, sometimes they're the person you wish they could be consistently. It's actually a well-documented phenomenon. Intermittent reinforcement is one of the strongest forms of conditioning. A slot machine that pays out occasionally is more addictive than one that never pays out at all. So you stay. You think, well, they're not always like this. They can be wonderful when they want to be. Maybe if I'm patient enough, if I love them enough, the good version will become the consistent version. Years pass. The pattern doesn't change, and you sacrificed your well-being while waiting for a transformation that's not coming. Let's talk about the signs that it might be time to let go of a relationship. If you find yourself constantly making excuses for someone's behavior to others or to yourself, that's a sign. If you feel relieved when they're not around rather than missing them, that's a sign. If you've lost yourself, changed fundamental parts of who you are to accommodate them, suppressed your dreams or your voice to keep peace, those are signs. If the relationship is characterized by chronic dishonesty, if trust has been broken repeatedly without genuine amends, if you feel manipulated or controlled, if your mental health is deteriorating from the stress of the relationship, these are all indications that this connection is harming you. One of the most painful realizations is that someone's potential is not the same as their reality. You can see who they could be. You can see the person underneath the dysfunction. But that person has to want to emerge, has to do the work to heal and grow, and you cannot do that work for them. You cannot love someone into health. You cannot care someone into change. I've watched people waste decades waiting for someone to become who they could be. A woman staying with an alcoholic who promises every week that he'll quit, but never does. A man remaining in a friendship with someone who only calls when they need something, never reciprocating support. A daughter trying endlessly to win her mother's approval, not understanding that her mother is incapable of giving it. There's grief involved. Even if the relationship was harmful, you're grieving the loss of what you hoped it could be. You're grieving the time invested. You're grieving the version of the future you imagined. This grief is real and valid and deserves space. There's also often guilt. What if I'm giving up too easily? What if they need me? What if I'm being selfish? But here's what I want you to understand. Setting boundaries and removing yourself from harm is not selfish. It's essential. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot help someone at the expense of destroying yourself. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for them, is to leave. Your continued presence might actually be enabling their dysfunction. Your absence might be the catalyst they need to finally face themselves and do the necessary work. Family relationships add another layer of complexity. We didn't choose our family, and there's often enormous cultural and social pressure to maintain those bonds, regardless of how unhealthy they are. But they're your brother. Family is everything. Family is not everything if family is destroying you. Being related by blood does not give someone unlimited access to harm you. You can love your family from a distance. You can wish them well while protecting yourself from their toxicity. You can honor the relationship in whatever form works for you, which might be minimal contact or no contact at all. The concept of boundaries is crucial here. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about defining what you will and won't accept in your life. I won't spend time with you when you're drunk. I won't engage in conversations where I'm being criticized constantly. I won't lend money that's never repaid. I won't stay in a relationship where I'm not respected. Setting boundaries often reveals who can be in your life and who can't. People who respect you will respect your boundaries. They might not like them, but they'll honor them. People who cannot respect your boundaries cannot be close to you. It's that simple. Ending a relationship doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't require a huge confrontation or a final devastating conversation. Sometimes it's a gradual distancing. Sometimes it's simply deciding not to re-engage, not to respond, not to invest energy anymore. Sometimes closure is something you create internally rather than something you get from the other person. In fact, waiting for closure from someone who hurt you is often another way of staying attached. They might never acknowledge what they did. They might never apologize. They might never give you the explanation you want, and if you're waiting for that before you can move on, you're giving them continued power over your life. You create your own closure. You decide the relationship is over. You grieve it, you learn from it, and you move forward. Their participation in this process is not required. After ending a toxic relationship, there's often a period where you second-guess yourself. You remember the good times. You wonder if you made a mistake. You might even feel tempted to reach back out. This is normal. This is your psyche adjusting to the absence of something familiar, even if what was familiar was painful. This is where you need to be strong and remember why you left. Write down the reasons if you need to. Keep a record of the harm, not to fuel bitterness, but to remind yourself when nostalgia clouds your judgment. Reach out to trusted friends who can reflect reality back to you. With time, as you heal, you'll start to feel lighter. You'll notice that you're not anxious all the time. You'll rediscover parts of yourself that got lost in the dysfunction. You'll have energy for relationships that actually nourish you. You'll understand that the space you created by letting go has filled with something better: peace, self-respect, freedom. Not all difficult relationships need to end. Some are worth fighting for, worth working on, worth the effort to repair. The difference is reciprocity. If both people are willing to do the work, to change patterns, to go to therapy, to be honest, to try, then there's hope. But if only one person is carrying the entire weight of the relationship, if only one person is changing and compromising and sacrificing, then it's not a relationship. It's a one-person rescue mission, and those don't work. The art of letting go sometimes means letting go of people. This doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean you don't value connection or loyalty. It means you value yourself. It means you understand that some endings are necessary for new beginnings. It means you're brave enough to choose your well-being over the comfort of the familiar. You deserve relationships that are mutual, that honor who you are, that help you grow rather than keep you stuck. You deserve to be with people who see you, value you, and treat you with respect. And you will never find those relationships if you're too busy trying to fix the unfixable, too busy giving to people who only take, too busy tolerating what should be intolerable. Letting go of toxic relationships is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself. And sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do for the other person too, even if they'll never see it that way.